I want to start with a confession and an invitation. And a confession, I hope, that helps to kind of generate a really frank conversation that we need to have today. So I'm putting myself in the line there. For that, I do need to take my specs off because I can't see. By the way, my specs. My confession is followed by an invitation for us to use today to put at the core of all we do equity in this conversation. Before we take action, let's make it equitable. So I also want to invite you to think, when I use the phrase marginalized people when I talk, kind of substitute it for freelancers or smaller theatre organizations, because I want you to use the theatre ecology as a metaphor for the wider universe, because we know the world within a world is theatre, right? And there are so many parallels that can help us explore the solutions to taking collective, sector-wide action on climate change. So my confession, when Zoe kindly asked me to take part, I really, really wanted to say no. I was just like, it's not for me, I'm not interested, it's not my fight, it's not what I do in the sector. It's on my to-do list, but it's somewhere below when we deal with racism, ableism, classism, then I'll get to climate action, and that's the truth. So it's on my to-do list. That might resonate with some of you. Maybe not many in this room, but for many marginalized people who daily step into the fray of injustice just by living their life, it's on the to-do list. It's just not a priority. And it might resonate with some of the people that you engage with, the communities you work with, the communities that help you demonstrate to the Arts Council that you are dedicated and mean their investment principles will come alive in your space. So why does climate justice feel like a dialogue of privilege? Because agency is important, vital. Having the means to make change, having the voice and the space to engage. So why do many marginalized people tune out? Because so many of the ideas, solutions, mitigations, adaptations for climate solutions are done to and not with. Because so much of this, both our action and inaction, affects marginalized people the most. We know this, despite them having the least agency to drive that change, because power typically speaks to power and typically doesn't look like us, because frankly, we've got so much else to navigate. Activists have coined the term environmental racism to refer to when neighborhoods and densely populated by ethnically diverse Black and Asian communities have a disproportionate number of environmental hazards and sources of pollution that lower the quality of life. In my thinking, at least, I'd like to refine that to say classism and ableism is affected as well. And we understand this on a global scale. Global South nations are already suffering the results of our actions and abuse of Earth's resources. But it's happening nationally, locally, and in our sector too. And if I go to London and I think about ULEZ, it only matters to people who have cars, can afford to run cars, because everybody else is already on the buses and the trams. They've already done the adaptation that you've suggested, the mitigation that you've suggested. For those already living at the margins, the costs of, or the pros and cons of having the heat pumps loan credits means nothing at all, because they're lucky if their boilers are working. It's just not on the agenda. It's beyond financial consideration. So the people who've already cut their consumption to the quick, who don't have the resource, financial or time to do more than what they're doing to remain economically and emotionally viable, for them, climate action feels like a luxury they don't have time for. And also, activism can be a dangerous place. So for people who experience disproportionately high levels of arrest or harsher sentencing, you might think twice about your choice to jump to support the right to protest and exercise your own right to process. So what can we do to make this vital work feel less of a privilege and more like the universal urgency that it actually is? The first thing to do is to understand what we mean by climate justice. And what's weird about my instinctive desire to say no to today's conversation is that I truly believe, I deeply believe, and I want to leave this with you, that EDI is ESG. It's one and the same thing. The narrative about equity, diversity, and inclusion is inextricably about the dialogue of environment, social, and governance. You can't have one without the other. So when we think about adaptive methods of redistributing resources, say, again, put in mind the smaller company, the larger company, we have to not just work out what is fair and distributive redistributing resources, we also have to work out how does that impact on the big, on the small, on the individuals, and importantly, who's got a voice in that conversation. So my request to you, as I'm so running out of time, is about adaptation, taking into account recognition of those voices, collaboration that is all through from your front of house, with your technical staff, with your learning and development teams and everybody else, and your communities. How to make everybody part of that conversation starts with a genuine understanding that EDI is ESG. I'd actually welcome using the term environmental and social equity. Thank you.